Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It is a pleasure to host our first Canton Network Meet the Founder AMA. Today, I am joined by the co-founder and COO here today. Shaw, would you like to give a little quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you, everyone. It's amazing to see the community growth. As people who know me here know, I'm quite an introvert, so it's even a bit daunting to see so many people. But it's absolutely lovely. Just in terms of a bit of background, I've been a programmer kind of all my life, usually doing low-level stuff and microcontroller stuff and microcode at Intel. And then in 2010, I heard about ZKPs and snarks. It blew my mind that I can pretty much prove anything about computation and zero knowledge. It was a really niche field at the time, and most people thought that it's a nice theoretical construct, but you can't really build a practical ZKP. So I joined a few people who today are prominent in the ZKP community, folks behind Starkware and Nasdaq before all of those companies existed, and we wanted to prove everyone wrong and build a practical ZKP. So that was around 2011. We went and built ZKP, and that led to libsnark, which was the first snark library. And then around 2012, I got bit by the Bitcoin bug. So I loved how simple Bitcoin was, and how we were writing hundreds of pages of math proofs for zero knowledge proofs, and then this Satoshi guy comes and in 9 pages of simple text explain how you can do money over the internet. So I immediately started playing around with Bitcoin and contributing a bit to Bitcoin Core and different libraries. Then it was really hard at the time to buy Bitcoin, so I started a Bitcoin brokerage in Israel. If there's anyone here from Israel, you probably know Bits of Gold. And there was just so much happening in 2013. So there was Mastercoin, the first kind of general smart contract blockchain. And the Bitcoin core devs started getting interested in snarks. So we started working on how can you do Bitcoin scaling with snarks? How can you do something like Zcash? Vitalik started thinking about Ethereum. I wanted to learn a lot about snarks and scaling. And then with all that backdrop, I read the Ethereum white paper and yellow paper, and I was kind of shocked that I agreed with the vision of being able to use blockchains for things like finance and land titles and many other things, but there was no mention of privacy, which kind of disappointed me, given all the stuff that we were doing at the time and the realization that you can do privacy with crypto. Then in 2014, I met my co-founders, Yuval and Eric, who at the time were at DRW in Cumberland. And we kind of had the same idea that L1s are the future of finance. But the way everyone was going at it, we didn't believe in that. And we said, you can actually do an L1 with privacy, and that works for regulated finance and for retail. So we went ahead and started digital asset in 2014 and started working on the Canton Network. And that's the network that exists today. So for the last 11 years, we've been working on that.
Sorry, I was muted. With all that experience, we've been able to see, especially for those who have been in the community, as well as we've seen quite a lot through the raising that Canton's been able to develop. What has it been like to be able to develop Canton? And overall, for the people who are new here, I know we've grown exponentially in the community. Could you be able to explain what Canton is for everyone?
Yeah, I mean, Canton, it's very simple to explain at a high level from a product perspective what it is. Canton is the only L1 private smart contract, and there's one thing to remember: it's that some L1s or most L1s have smart contracts, Ethereum, Solana, and many others, and then some L1s have great privacy, Zcash, but it doesn't have smart contracts, and then some L1s have L2s that claim they have privacy. And Canton it's the only L1 that has private smart contracts. And how it works is harder to explain, and I would recommend everyone kind of start with the white paper and decide how deep they want to go. Unfortunately, I'm not as good as Satoshi at writing a succinct white paper, but I think it's a good starting point. But at a very high level, we had a few kind of ground truths when we started designing Canton. So the first one was you can't expect everyone to want the same privacy model. Just like we use the internet analogy a lot and use that as inspiration. On the internet, it's a network of networks, and chase.com is locked down. You can only get to the web page, but you can't log in if you're not a customer. And even when you log in, you can only see certain things that do with your account, not with my account. And then on the other side, there's something like Craigslist or Wikipedia, where almost everything is public. And so that was one ground truth that we said, a network needs to be designed from scratch with that kind of privacy. Then the next thing is you can't replicate all of the state of the network. So if you want to scale, and even more important, if you want something to be decentralized, you can't require anyone on the network to have to commit so many resources to hold the entire state of the network on their node. So Canton was really designed from the ground up on sharding the entire state on a need-to-know basis. And the idea is, like, instead of the miners being the main infrastructure of the network, it's the individual nodes or the individual validators that are in control of the heavy lifting. And the super validators are there to facilitate that. So we had kind of two inspirations. One I said was the internet, and the internet is a network of networks. So every app, as I said, it's permissioned, and every connection to an ISP is also permissioned. But if you look at it, kind of zoom out, the internet is permissionless in the sense that anyone can connect to it, anyone can build on it, and can transact. So that was kind of one inspiration. And the second one, like an analogy that we give about it, is how the post office works. In the sense that using letters, I can correspond with anyone in the world, and I use some infrastructure to facilitate that. So I go to the post office and I put my letter in an envelope, and I get a timestamp on it. So the post office is there. It's an infrastructure provider that ensures the availability and the timely delivery and the timestamp on my letter, but they don't get to see what I'm corresponding with someone. So that's kind of, I know this is very high level. I didn't go into the details of how it works, but that's the idea, that different nodes are sending messages across them, and they're coordinating their state across them. And you have this infrastructure of super validators that transfer encrypted messages across them, just like in the internet, how we do it with HTTPS, and ISP doesn't necessarily see the contents of what they're transferring, but they're there as an infrastructure. But the power is kind of with the nodes themselves, and that's kind of very, very high level, how it works, without going too much into technical details.
No, absolutely. We appreciate it. I mean, the one thing I will say is that despite it not going into too technical of the details, there have been a lot of people in the community who have had, some very in-depth questions that they've been asked. And I know you've seen some of them, especially through all the activity that's going on. The first question, guys, and everyone that's here, I really want you all to know we've taken all your questions from the Discord community and have put them here together. So we'll be going through all of them. If you do have any that you would like to ask in the chat, please feel free to put them in there. We'll be monitoring it and making sure that we can get to all of them. The first one.
Yeah, can you hear me, Jason?
Yes, I can.
Oh, yeah. Did everyone get disconnected, or was it just me?
I think everyone got disconnected. Someone might have accidentally hit the end session button.
Oh, whoops.
It happens.
Yeah, but maybe I'll while people are coming in, I'll just repeat what I was saying. I don't know when it got disconnected, but we got a lot of questions on on governance and ecosystem development and roadmap and tech. So I'd recommend, because of my background, maybe we focus this session a bit more on the tech questions, and then my co-founders Eric and Yuval and their sessions will probably be much better at explaining kind of the roadmap and ecosystem development and governance.
Definitely agree. So let's get right into it. One of the first questions that came to us was about Canton's modular design. People were curious. A lot of people were curious, actually, and this came up quite often in our AMA questions channel, was how does the modular design help developers get faster transactions or lower costs compared to older blockchains? Yeah.
That's a good question. So Canton started from that premise that for an L1 to be widely adopted, really widely adopted and used by pretty much everyone, you can't have bottlenecks that all transactions have to flow. So I think of an ERC20 contract. It's a single smart contract. All transactions need to be applied to one by one, just because of its design. It holds the balances of everyone who holds that token. And I said we use a lot the internet as an inspiration. Like, imagine if you were on the internet and it was designed in such a way that there was one entity that needed to sequence all packets, and that could never scale. the reason the internet scales is because you have so many different ways to route packets. And essentially by adding infrastructure, you add capacity to the internet. So, it's not one mail server. You can add more and more mail servers. You can add more and more web servers. And that was kind of one of the fundamental principles of designing again. It was clear as day to us when we started that the data has to be sharded, and we kind of knew that at some point we're going to end up where all the other ones that started with centralized state would have some sort of sharding, similar to what the L2s are today. And so we just designed Canton from the start to be an L1 that is aware of that sharding. And if you look at what happened to Ethereum, especially in the early days, every time an app got popular and had high throughput, the fees would skyrocket, and the network would slow down, and then people moved off of Ethereum. So like whenever someone becomes successful, they would move on to another blockchain, or later they started moving on to L2s. And in Canton, you have that kind of built-in avenue. You can start with a global synchronizer, but then as the application gets more and more adopted, you have the ability to start moving on to other synchronizers. And we have some users of Canton today are doing thousands of transactions a second, but they don't need to necessarily use the global synchronizer to sequence those transactions. So that modular design means that scaling is a property of the amount of infrastructure. And people a lot of times in the crypto space, I think very different from different spaces, talk about scaling as how many TPS can you do, what needs to happen. When I was working at Intel, that was never the way people talked about scaling. It was more around like scaling is a property of how does the system behave as you change the amount of infrastructure, the amount of memory, the amount of CPU. And most blockchains, most L1s, you just don't have that ability. Adding capacity doesn't add scale. So Canton was designed for that idea that if you need to add scale, you can add capacity, and that capacity gives you the scale without having to cause like fees to skyrocket or without creating bottlenecks.
Thank you. I know everyone who's just joining now, please feel free to continue to drop your questions. Really appreciate the answer. Our following question coming from Martin, he's asked, in today's market, many blockchains, especially layer 1s and layer 2s, are developing support for RWAs and privacy. Obviously, Canton is definitely heavy on the privacy, and when it comes to scalability, this is something that is always a question of concern as well as a topic of conversation. So what's Canton's most sustainable competitive advantage that holds over these other competitors, especially long term?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Martin. So I'll start with, no other L1 and very few L2s were designed for privacy. So they're starting from a foundation that doesn't work for this specific design goal. They're trying to bolster it on top. And Eric, my co-founder, always gives the analogy of like, if you're building a house and you want to, switch the refrigerator later, or you want to switch the blinds, you can do that. But if you build a 2-story house and then you want to build a skyscraper, you can't use the same foundations. And I think that's a big problem that all of the L1s are hitting right now. So just to make this a bit more concrete and give an example, the EVM assumes that all of the memory of the EVM is shared across everyone. And that's so ingrained into the design of Ethereum smart contracts. It has no notion in an Ethereum smart contract of defining who can see which contracts. And anyone who's seen a Canton smart contract knows that like the smart contract always defines in that contract who can see it. That's like, it's in the lowest level of the infrastructure, that notion of not everyone can see all data. So whenever people try to build like an L2 on top of Ethereum or a private Ethereum or a rollup or something like that and want that with privacy, they end up having to design around the limitations of the underlying infrastructure that wasn't designed for this. Now, if you're talking about kind of sustainable mode, also, Canton was designed from the beginning with privacy, but it's also been in production for 5 years already with financial institutions. And as I said, folks are running thousands of transactions a second and billions of dollars a day using Canton. So it's also really kind of battle tested and production tested. So a lot of people, a lot of times people will ask, oh, well, what about zero knowledge proofs and Zcray, some things. And the question is like, how long do you have to solve these things? We've been hearing that they're 10 years away for the better part of more than 10 years now. So let's say I subscribe to that view that we'll solve things in the future, which I don't. But yeah, can we wait for that? And I also want to be clear. I'm accused on Twitter a lot for dunking on zero knowledge proofs and snarks, and we gave in the intro. I was one of the first people in that space and wrote the first papers, and I really love the technology, and it works great in a very limited set of use cases. I'm a big believer. You heard me talk about Zcash. I'm a big believer in Zcash. I'm a big believer in what Google is doing for age verification with zero knowledge proofs, but it's not for every use case, and people are looking at zero knowledge proofs as this practice panacea. So I think we just have Canton has that real world experience, and it works. It works very, very well, and it's been working for years. And it has all the foundations needed. Originally, when we built Canton, we even designed it. I thought we'd be using zero knowledge proofs. And the interesting thing is, like, as we designed, we figured out we don't need that, and we can still get the level of privacy we need. And I think that's a very very large and sustainable competitive advantage. It's very hard to recreate that level of design and experience.
With that being said, especially since you guys are trying to make the network of networks architecture, how does the global synchronizer mechanism ensure the atomicity of multi-party transactions while preserving privacy of sensitive data across participant-owned ledgers? Because we've seen other companies trying to produce this on a heavier scale, but there always seems to be some issues when companies do try to create something that is stated like this.
Yeah. I'll start with a non-answer, which is like, if you go into the detail, there's a lot, but ultimately, I think users should not care. And the whole smart contract language for Canton was designed to abstract this away from the users. So of course, trust me is not a good answer. So we definitely want people who are interested in going into the low level of the protocol to come in and poke holes and build there. But I'll start with, like, this shouldn't be complicated for the user, and that's another thing I kind of have a lot of empathy for the developer who doesn't need to understand how it works. But with that, I'll go into the specifics. So there's a concept called the two-phase commit, and that's something that's well known and been used for many decades, and it ensures, essentially, two-phase commit ensures that different nodes, different computer processes are synchronized on some data. And what Canton does under the hood, it allows any number of parties to do a two-phase commit transaction, which essentially means a transaction either updates at all of the nodes or at none of them, and it's an atomic transaction. But it just works in a different way than other blockchains that use start from proof of work and then proof of stake. So essentially, we're saying for every contract, only those who need to be involved in that contract participate in that two-phase commit and see that contract. Now, part of the protocol of a two-phase commit is that you need a sequencer that ensures that everyone has the relevant data and that timestamps the messages. But that sequencer doesn't need to know what it's putting the timestamp on. So again, going back to the post office analogy, it puts a timestamp on the message or on an encrypted hash of the message, and it delivers the message, but those synchronizers don't actually need to see the message, and the nodes themselves run a two-phase commit protocol for every single contract separately. And because of the need-to-know basis, this thing scales, because even though we're actually doing a consensus round on every single transaction, each node is only participating in those transactions that it participates in economically. So it doesn't actually need to go through that two-phase commit for every transaction on the network, only for those that it's interested in. And keeping with the post office analogy, like, if the post office is running slow, you can go to competing private service. You can go to UPS, you can go to FedEx, and send your letter with Uber delivery. So none of those actually see the contents of your package, but you can go to different providers, and you don't have to always pick one. You can use one synchronizer, for now, and then go and do the next transaction through a different synchronizer.
Perfect.
That was a mouthful. I hope that was clear, but again, if not, I'm happy to follow up over Telegram if anyone wants more.
I think for me it was clear. I'm sure the good thing about this is we're recording this, and if through the recordings, if anyone does have any follow-up questions, or even if anyone would like to ask any follow-up questions as we're going through it, please don't hesitate. In the meantime, we will continue to go through the rest of the questions that we have on hand. Heslin, he was wondering, you know, Canton is described as permissionless, but it's also built for institutions that need privacy and compliance. How does the architecture balance that decentralization within those strict requirements?
Yeah, it's I guess is the internet permissionless or used for financial institutions? It's it's kind of the same. It's permissionless in the sense that everyone can use the network and everyone can build on it, and but every individual app operator gets to decide what permissions the users have. So, and permissionless in Canton doesn't mean it's the transparent internet computer that everyone can see my bank balance and how many NFTs and how many of each ERC20 token I have. It's permissionless in the sense of permissionless for builders, permissionless for users. And if I try to sign up to one validator service, I don't want to run my own validator, then and they don't accept me because I don't know, they have some KYC processes, I can go to another one, or I can spin up my own validator. Again, very similar to the internet. If for some reason Google doesn't let you use Gmail, you go and use Proton. So I don't think there's a dichotomy there. I don't think there's a problem with being a permissionless network that's also used by financial institutions. Financial institutions use the internet. It did take them a few years to get used to that idea, and initially they didn't do that. And it was the same with Canton. The reason that Canton wasn't a public network for the first 9 or so years of the network was because of pushback from customers and users who said, "Hey, we're not comfortable with this just yet from a tech risk perspective." Which for us, the founders, was extremely disappointing. We all came from being like early Bitcoin maxis, and we wanted to build an L1. That's what we set out to do. And for 10 years, we were being held back by customers who said, "Hey, we can't find any holes, but still completely comfortable." But at some point, as the technology became more mature, financial institutions kind of, I think, started understanding that analogy to the internet and saying, "Yeah, we can actually coexist and use this as infrastructure. And it's okay for there to be a cat NFT app running alongside my my bond issuance platform, but as long as those two transactions don't deal with each other and we can KYC and onboard responsibly our users, that's absolutely fine." And they may, banks may take some time until they start getting comfortable, maybe never with like using an AMM or using another DeFi protocol. But the nice thing is that's where every app operator has the ability to choose how they want to interact with the rest of the network. It's not permissionless in the sense that anyone can just do whatever the hell they want. It's anyone, anyone can build something, and then they have to work with the other app providers to see how people want to interact with each other. Not dissimilar from how SaaS works today. Anyone can build a SaaS application, but if you want to integrate with someone's API, they decide how you can integrate with it.
With all that being said, would you be able to give like a real world example of how Canton keeps that data private while still letting regulators do its job?
Yeah, definitely. It's, so the example that I would typically give is like, and this is where it's very different from other chains with privacy. Even within a single transaction, you have kind of different privacy views, differential privacy. So I'm going to give a simplified example. It's not really how typically the transactions are actually much more complex in the kind of regulated financial world. But if I want to do a stock trade with someone, so Jason, I'm sending you some stock and you're sending me some cash. Now, in the financial world, it's not a peer-to-peer transaction. I don't hold cash in my wallet. You don't hold stock in your wallet. We have our custodians and we have our banks. So let's keep it simplified. We both have banks. We both have custodians. So in the context of that transaction, there are 4 nodes participating, or 6 nodes. There's me, there's my counterparty, there are the 2 banks, and there are the 2 custodians. And in that context, so me and my counterparty, we both see the part of the transaction. We see the whole transaction. We see that we're moving, one unit of stock for $400. Now, our nodes encrypt that transaction in multiple different views. So our banks will need to authorize that transaction, but they will only see that $400 are transferring from one bus to the other. They don't need to see why, because if I'm authorized to send you $400, that's all my bank needs to know, and that's all your bank needs to know. And our custodians will see 1 unit of stock transferring between us. because they don't need to know the price. They're not, from a legal perspective, they're not supposed to know the price for a stock trade. So the nodes will do this two-phase commit, but encrypting into multiple views where the banks will see the cash, the custodians will see the stock move, and we'll see the whole transaction. Now, what a lot of the regulated financial institutions are doing, they're saying, okay, we also need some other entity to see this. So whether it's the regulator, whether it's someone like a Elliptic or any of the platforms that know how to track things on a blockchain, that's a decision that they can add to the contract and say, these are the other entities who are allowed to see this transaction. So that's how we get privacy, because of the ability to explicitly say who is allowed to see every transaction. That's how we get privacy, but it in no way negates the need or the ability to be regulated to whatever extent the regulators need to be involved. I'll actually say that we've engaged with regulators very, very early on in the company, and we've learned that regulators don't actually want to track every transaction, but if they want to do that, that ability exists. But again, it's very, very flexible in terms of the ability, and we're not relying on some kind of complex moon math to say, hey, regulator, trust me, everything's checked out. If they need to see the transaction, they see the transaction, and if they don't need to see it, they don't see it.
Mohammed actually is bringing up a good point or a good question here that kind of filters in, especially with this. It seems like, especially with this, there's been a lot of talk lately, especially how AI could automate a lot of these workflows as well as these transactional requirements across the network. I'm curious how you see AI and blockchain coming together in Canton, maybe for things like automated compliance.
Yeah, I think AI is a fascinating technology. I always used to joke back in 2014 and say, hey, if you do one thing, do AI. If you do two, do blockchain. But it's a fascinating technology, and I think it's a bit orthogonal to what systems you apply AI to. So all the same things. I think AI will make us much better at monitoring transactions. Again, when I'm allowed to to monitor transactions. If we look at, if a regulator now needs to ingest a huge amount of transactions, they can do that and potentially, use AI to flag transactions. If I'm a developer writing for Canton, I'm going to use all the AI tools. I don't think that it's going to be any different from the use of AI in any other application. There are two means to build applications. At the end, people are trying to build useful applications, and Canton is one tool in the toolkit, and AI is the second tool in the toolkit. We've seen really interesting stuff. So there's a company working on mortgages. I don't know if I can say their name, but they're using Canton to register the mortgages, to transfer them between different regulated entities, to do all kinds of very interesting things and compose applications between those mortgages and other financial products. And they're using AI because when you have a mortgage application, all the data around mortgage, you have a lot of documents and you want to flag things in the document for correctness. So again, it's an app provider that is doing very interesting stuff with both technologies. But again, I don't think it's very different. I don't see like AI plus blockchain is different from AI plus any other domain in computer science or in software development.
Thank you for that. Honestly, that makes a lot more sense. I'm curious about that mortgage company, but I feel like I'll ask those questions on the side because
if any of you are on the call, if any of you are on the call and want to jump in and name yourselves, I'll let you do it.
Moving forward, since atomic settlement is a core feature, are there any limits on the types or number of assets you can settle in one go? And what type of asset classes can users expect to see on Canton?
Yeah, so there's no, like anything, there's always a limitation. We're limited by speed of light and the amount of atoms in the universe. But for all practical purposes, there aren't real limitations. Nothing we've come across. So transactions on Canton can be extremely large by any kind of standard of any other blockchain. The real thing that's kind of costly from a resource perspective is the differential privacy. So if I have like one transaction and there are 1,000 different parties that each one needs to have a different view of that transaction, I've never come across that kind of case. But that would be pretty resource intensive, and it would cost a very large fee on the global synchronizer. But we kind of recommend to people usually don't do atomic settlement of more than 1,000 legs in one go. There's no hard limit. It's kind of just, we know that works very well. We've seen things work that well. If you want to try and test 10,000, go ahead and test 10,000. It's just, I haven't come across anyone needing to do more than that. And in the 5 years we've been in production, or 6 years now, I think, in production with Canton, we have an extremely heterogeneous bunch of use cases and customers. So we have, at one extreme, we have those who are doing like very, very high throughput and low latency, not HFT, but sub-second, very low latency compared to blockchains. So they're doing very, very large amounts of transactions a second. And then on the other extreme, we have those who are doing like a few transactions an hour, but they have giant payloads in the tens and hundreds of megabytes per transaction, because they just have a huge amount of data on every contract. So like anything, there's an upper limit to any single node, and anyone who's interested can go into documentation and see what those upper limits are for very large beefy machines. But I'm really unaware of anyone who's even near hitting the limitations. And while there are limitations for like a specific node, because of the design of the network itself, you can always scale up the network more nodes. So like if I have a specific application that hits a limit, let's say it's doing 20,000 transactions a second, and for some reason I need 40, I'll have to spin up, maybe a new synchronizer and a new set of nodes, but there's no limitation on that horizontal scale. That really is, as much as I have money to spend on machines, and that depends on how successful my business is, I can go and add more capacity.
Well, with this, this kind of dives back into the privacy that was mentioned. Someone in the chat, his name was Rye. He was asking me, he was curious. He gave the example of, let's say he buys a concert ticket through a Canton DApp. He wants the organizer to see that payment, but not the total balance or past purchase. Could Canton be able to do that kind of selective privacy as of right now?
Yeah.
And
that's exactly what Canton is designed to do. So that's kind of another example of kind of that stock versus cash example. If I'm buying a concert ticket from someone, then we'll see the concert ticket, we'll see the cash that's transferring, but that person will not see how much cash I hold, and no one else on the network will see that. And the concert venue, if they're the ones who built that concert app, they won't. And let's say I'm paying with USDC, they won't see the USDC transfer, or they'll only see the concert ticket transfer, and Circle will only see the cash movement. So that's really exactly what Canton was designed to do. And if you look at all of the other blockchains who are talking about privacy, they're talking about privacy within a specific group, but they're not talking about privacy of individual transactions, and especially not of sub-transaction. If you think about almost every transaction in the financial world, there's almost always this kind of differential privacy where different entities need to see different parts of that transaction. So it's a good example, and that's exactly what Canton was designed from the start to do. And to be honest, I'm quite shocked that about 10 years after we started working on this, that we still don't see anyone who could do that kind of within a transaction, that level of privacy without having to jump through a huge amount of hoops. So it's like the thing that's the most trivial to do in Canton is extremely hard to do with any other blockchain that from the limited ones that do have privacy.
Canulin was curious. He's new to Canton Network, self-admittedly, especially with all the new retail traders as well as retail developers coming into Canton Network. What kind of preparation or skills should we focus on as developers if we seriously want to start building on Canton?
Yeah. First of all, welcome, and I hope you want to develop on Canton. I'm biased, but I do think it's a beautiful technology and a fascinating one. And so I think it's not different from regular developer skills. Like the same skills that you need to be a good developer. Maybe I'll give the example. Whenever I talk to recruiters about hiring engineers, I always say I couldn't care less if someone has a blockchain in their previous jobs. I want to see a good developer, and we can teach them how to build Canton applications. If a blockchain developer doesn't know good coding skills, then we won't be able to teach them. So I think just not Canton specific, I'd say it's just having kind of a good understanding of multiple programming languages and everything from kind of full stack from UI to low level. I think it's too many application developers today kind of stay at the application level and aren't curious enough about what's happening at the lower level. And I know we have abstractions in Canton. We try to design things so you wouldn't need to understand the lower level, but it's always great to be able to go kind of one step down and to have a generalist overview of knowing how the things work and why they work that way. Specifically with Canton, if someone wants to get involved, I'd say, just go ahead and find whatever application you want to build and start building it. The language is a bit, smart contract language is a bit kind of different from what you would expect, because you have to think about, who sees what. But start out there. Today there are great AI tools, so you can just start using Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude, and it will actually help you with a lot of the stuff that would otherwise be kind of pretty hard to learn. I'd say just dive in, build some application, whatever the pet peeve is, and go ahead with that. Yeah, I don't think you need to be anything other than just a good developer to build a Canton application.
Now, from a more technical standpoint, Rye has been blowing up with questions, especially in the server. From a technical angle, what's better about Canton's extended UTXO model compared to account-based or a regular UTXO system?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll take a step back because I'm not sure how technical everyone is. So
yeah,
kind of the 1 minute overview. So Bitcoin has if you think about how it stores its data, it has a model called UTXO, unspent transaction outputs. Essentially says, hey, you have you're holding kind of coins in your wallet, and every coin has a certain amount. So you can have one coin that's 2 Bitcoin, and one that's half a Bitcoin, and one that's 0.75 Bitcoins. And a transaction may gather a few different coins and then send them to someone, and there may be some change. So I can create 2 different coins. One is the one that I'm sending to someone, and the second one is the change. So that's one way of doing things. Now that gets a bit complex for the application developer, because now instead of just having a balance, when us kind of mere mortals think about bank account balance, I have $5,000 in my bank account. I don't care about how that's split up in the database. And in Bitcoin, you kind of need to think about that low-level stuff of how it's actually represented in the database. Ethereum really, what they did really, really great early on is they optimized the whole kind of developer experience in Ethereum for what I consider a relatively inexperienced developer. And that's great, because that's how it built such a great community, because so many college grads came in, people who didn't know systems programming and low-level programming, and they came in, it was just something that felt very intuitive. Like, okay, I just have a balance, and I want to send it, and there are different trade-offs. It makes it, all the things that I'm saying that, Ethereum is inferior at the technical level, at the infrastructure level, it's much easier to learn than learning how to develop for Canton. They really optimized for that kind of extremely easy onboarding experience for a new developer, and they did a really great job there. And so Ethereum has an account model. So if I look at an ERC20 token, it's just this big account that's how much balance everyone has. So I can look up, and because everything is transparent on Ethereum, I can look at my address, and it says I have 17 of some ERC20 token. And then I want to send 2 to someone, it'll update my 15, and it'll update the person who I sent it to and add 2 to their balance. It's really, really intuitive. It's very easy to understand. It has scaling problems. So one, it works well only when you have transparency, when everyone can see everyone's balances. And it means that now we need to sequence every single transaction. So we can't parallelize and send all the transactions in at the same time. We just send the transactions in one by one. If you compare that to Bitcoin, in Bitcoin I can have use this bucket of coins for one transaction and a different bucket of coins for second transaction, and then a third bucket of coins for third transaction. So I hope that was a kind of clear primer for the question for UTXO and an account-based model. So there's a huge advantage for UTXO in 2 things: in privacy and in scaling. So in privacy, because the balances are sharded, it's exactly going back to that concert ticket question. If I'm buying a concert ticket for $17, I can have one piece of state that all it has is that I own $17. It doesn't say anything about the rest of my bank account. and I can send those $17 to some, to some. So that's kind of from a privacy perspective. From a scaling perspective, if I want to put in like 1,000 transactions a second at the same time, I can do really smart things about holding different balances in different UTXOs, in these different unspent transaction outputs, and now I can start routing different balances to different transactions. It does put a lot more overhead on the application developer. So the nice thing about Canton, if you want to do an account model, you can. It's not kind of the way that it's not the blessed way to do it. It's not the scalable way to do it. But if you just want to get started and not have to think about it too much, you just put all of your balance in one UTXO and keep on updating that. I would not recommend that. But for someone who's just getting started, go ahead and do that. If that's the way to kind of to build an application. And then as you start hitting scaling limits, you can go and start kind of doing more clever stuff about managing your data. When we started Canton, very early on, it was a UTXO model, a pure UTXO model. Extended UTXO is just kind of, it says, hey, you don't always have to replace these UTXOs. Some UTXOs, so in Bitcoin, you have this thing that every transaction, once you use the UTXO, you can't use it again. You can never reference that UTXO bit. So it's kind of a one-time use thing. And then if I've used that coin and I want to do another transaction, I have to use a different coin. But when you're starting to think about general smart contracts, there's a lot of data that's very static, that doesn't change. So like if I need to prove as part of a transaction that I'm KYC'd, that contract that stores the data that I'm KYC'd, that doesn't change. I can be KYC'd and that KYC may be valid for 1 year. So all I want to do is say, hey, as part of this transaction, I want to reference the fact that I'm KYC'd, and I don't want that I need to kind of create a new KYC contract for every transaction. So that's where it went from UTXO to extended UTXO and said, hey, some data is UTXO is just like Bitcoin, where once I've used the token, it's invalidated and I can't use it again. I can't double spend it. Then for other things that are more like reference data, hey, I'm KYC'd or I'm a valid user of this application. Those are things that can stay static and I can reference them in a transaction, but I don't invalidate it every time I use that transaction. I hope that wasn't too much or too fast.
No, that helped a lot. That helped a lot, especially with the understanding of what UTXO systems are and how they work. Canton, this is one question from Future123. Do you see Canton becoming an open standard for financial interoperability, like how Swift is for payments or fixes for trading?
Yeah, I mean, our hope, and we built Canton to be, the protocol, the interoperability protocol across, the database of all institutions, and that's our hope. We want to be the L1 that we use because we think it's designed to be, the best one. Swift comes from an era of like people needed to find a way to interoperate, and Swift is kind of an old school 1970s reconciliation. You have messages and back and forth, and you have some standard around that message, and fix is kind of the same. And it deals with, if I talk about like a two-phase commit protocol, Swift is kind of the message passing of that protocol. And we have the system of global reconciliation today using Swift, but it deals with like the happy path. I wire money to you, and it goes through this large correspondent banking system. And if there's a problem, then we reconcile by a lot of people picking up phone calls and faxes and emails, and ultimately we figure out how to fix it. And at the end of this thing, my bank's database changes and reduces my balance, and your bank's database changes and it increases your balance. So you can think of this as like a human-based two-phase commit protocol, and Swift is just the messaging layer of that. Canton is really kind of the next level of automation of that idea, and saying, hey, we know better by now. We understand that there's a way to do all of this programmatically, and there's a huge amount of complexity in two-phase commits, especially under the hood, like in the unhappy path. If you have a malicious actor, that's what. Like, if everyone was good and working according to protocol and no bugs and no malicious actors, it would have been dead simple to build Canton. The really hard thing is to do how do you deal with this when someone is purposely trying to steal money, or purposely trying to bring down the system. And Canton is essentially just saying, hey, now we can bring it up a notch. We can bring it up a level. We can let application developers not have to think about the message passing and not have to have personnel try to fix everything. And by the way, that's the reason that it takes 3 days to do an international wire transfer, because we kind of need to give that 3 day of latency to wait to see if something if something went wrong and to revert it through a bunch of phone calls if it did go wrong. But now now we're in an era where Canton is essentially saying, hey, we can actually have these databases transact. We can have both of our banks and all of the corresponding banking system update in real time and do this programmatically. So definitely our goal is not to replace Swift as a company or not to replace like any of those companies, but companies involved with the technology that comes, because Swift has a huge role in coordinating the global financial system from a governance and business coordination point of view. But Canton is there to be a better system that allows you to do the things that people today use Swift and Fix to do. By all means, like that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make finance flow, make it really like Jonathan, who's on this call, always says like the CMO who came in to the financial system, he kind of just assumed that things work, and as he's learning from us like how things really work, it's kind of shocking because you, as a retail person who uses like the payment apps, you kind of just expect things to work. And it's amazing how much it's actually broken, and not broken because anyone is stupid, just broken because things have been built over decades. And I'm saying, finance can flow and it should flow the way you expect it to just work. And that's ultimately the goal of Canton. And I'd say step one is with finance, but it's a generic protocol. It's not just for finance. They're the ones who are very interested in paying the bills. But a few months ago, I had to go and get a document apostilled, and getting coordination across governments where you're getting a birth certificate from one government and you're getting some weird kind of signature on it on a paper format. Those are things that in 2025 should have been solved. It's not. It doesn't end with finance. It should be like I should just be able to to prove that I have a valid birth certificate from one country to another country, and that should just update on their database with no problem.
Thank you, Haji, with a question about Canton Coin or CC. We know that this is a huge benefit for developers as well as people to build within or benefit from the Canton ecosystem. I was curious about if there's any plans for a native token, if this is the native token, or if there's any plans for a native token for governance or fees, or was Canton designed to stay tokenless on purpose?
No, so to be clear, there is Canton Coin. Canton Coin is live. It's been live since last year. So there is a token. Today, it trades OTC, but some point soon it will be traded on exchanges. But there is a token. The token is there because how do you incentivize an ecosystem of people, to collaborate? So the token is there. You use it to pay fees. So everyone who's using Canton uses it to pay fees for the synchronization. That's the equivalent here is you put a stamp on your envelope, and that's the way you pay the post office. So if you want to get a transaction sequence, you pay with Canton Coin. Now, if you don't want to hold Canton Coin, that's fine. There are companies that do that transition, and you pay them dollars, and they'll pay for your traffic. But the coin exists. It's live. It's been live since last year. So definitely there is an incentive mechanism. The really, I think the really nice thing about Canton, as opposed to every other ecosystem I'm aware of, bulk of rewards in Canton goes to application builders. And in all other blockchains I'm aware of, it goes to those who already have capital, to the stakers, to the miners. There's people who have a ton of capital to put there. They get the rewards. Canton, our philosophy was the people who bring the value to the ecosystem are the builders. It's the people who build applications, people who onboard users, and they should get the bulk of the rewards, not just the infrastructure provider. So early on, we needed to bootstrap the network. The super validators, got the biggest part in kind of the first month and years of the network. But very quickly that changes, and most of the rewards go to the application builders. So, and if any builders here, that's kind of a big incentive, and I've already seen a lot of people were really surprised to hear that. And really interesting. Now you have a way to actually monetize that's much easier, where you're bringing the value to the network, and proportional to the amount of value you're bringing to the network, you're getting the new coins that are minted.
Beautiful. I know we're running to our end of the hour, so we'll take one more question. I did see this earlier, and I was I honestly wanted to say, outside of this, when do you, and this is more so just an opinion, more so an opinion based one for you, Shaw. When do you think that crypto payments will become, or globally will switch to a crypto payment on credit card, especially since Canton is developing such a large framework for this to be possible? When do you think we would be able to actually use it globally like we do with banks for our daily lives?
Yeah, I mean it's happening. It's happening very fast. I think we talked to a lot of different parties, and I don't know who saw the announcement of Circle supporting Canton natively very soon, and they're taking a big part of the network. I think one of the big limitations that existed until now was, up until 1 or 2 years ago, it was just the reluctance of large financial institutions of doing things on public networks. And second is, to this day, there is no private version of USDT or USDT or any other stablecoin other than on Canton. So there are a few stablecoins already running on Canton, including USDC in limited preview right now, and there's Braille and a few others. So I think that limitation of not having privacy, that was always a non-starter for almost every institution. So you're not going to give payroll or do internal company transfer payments or pay your vendors using a stablecoin if everyone can just view it. So it's coming fast. I don't think it replaces the credit card infrastructure. I don't think everyone kind of realizes, but a big part of the credit card companies, Visa and MasterCard and American Express, is the business model. It's kind of like Swift. It's the coordination of the different companies, of the interchange fees, of how to do risk management. That's not going away just because we change the underlying rails. But the credit card companies, all of them are doing things with stablecoins, and today it's still very limited and early production. But the world is going that way and it's going fast. I don't know if it's a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 10 years from now that's kind of the main way that it moves. But it's somewhere in that time, and it's we're just seeing it coming very, very fast.
Thank you so much, Shaw. Before we end this off, there's a few things I'd love to really point at. Is everyone, thank you. First off, I would love to say thank you, everyone, for attending this AMA. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but that doesn't mean you should stop asking questions. We're here around in the Discord as well as in the Telegram to be able to answer as many questions as possible. If you are in the Discord, one thing we recommend, and you are a developer, one thing we recommend is linking your GitHub to your Discord account so you can get access to the developer channel where you can truly get all the insights, resources, or whatever you may need to truly participate with inside the ecosystem. Obviously, there are approval processes, but slowly and surely we are making sure that we are getting to everyone we can. Shaw, if there's anything you'd like to say to reiterate why.
Yeah,
please.
I just want to say, first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone. I mean, I started this with saying that I tend to be introverted, but the questions were great and got me animated and excited. So, thank you for that, and especially thank you to everyone who's participating and spreading the word, and first and foremost the builders, anyone who's building things of value using Canton. That's really the way we build things, building valuable applications and valuable services for for other people. Huge thanks, and I love seeing everything that's happening on the Telegram and Discord channels, and just the amount of activity, and also the pace at which people are building things is just mind blowing. So really great job, and if you're a builder, then great, and if you're a user, use these things as an application developer. The most valuable thing is getting users, getting early feedback from early adopters who are willing to sometimes live with the kinks. So every time you see an application announcement, just go and use it, stress test it, and give the developers feedback. So thank you, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. We will have the recording once it is finished being uploaded. We're looking forward to seeing you again. And once again, thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Have a great one, guys.